Well, this week's Manshake's Gutsiest Player of the Week award goes to every single Tigers player involved in that unbelievable boil-over in Bathurst last night. The gutsy upset over back-to-back premiers, the Panthers, brings an end to an incredible 237-day losing streak. Joey, how good must this have felt for every single Tigers player out there?
Well, you saw the reaction after the game. So happy for everyone involved with the club. I thought it happened last week against Manly. They went within a whisker of beating Manly, but I thought they just totally simplified their game and backed their defence, played the conditions well, played tough.
Yeah, one player that really played well and that was instrumental in the victory was Luke Brooks. I thought he was outstanding. His kicking game, he kicked a 40-20 in the first half and a 40-20 in the second half, and both led to tries and set up the first try with a nice little kick. He was back to his best running the football. You get a good gauge on what sort of attitude your team has going into a game when it's wet, and it's been wet the last 2 weeks. And like you said, against Manly last week, they showed a great attitude and a great courage to go into that game, and they did it again out at Bathurst. It was teeming down the whole game and beat the premiers, the reigning premiers.
Well, he simplified his game, like the Tigers.
Yeah.
Totally simplified his... Yeah, he's totally...
Appy was on.
He's a running halfback.
But how impressive is that too? Because he is someone that cops the full brunt of it as well, and just to keep showing up and keep putting in like he has, and then to have a performance like that.
Well, no one really knows. No one really knows until you're under that pressure. You can say, oh, it must be horrible, but until you're getting hammered like that...
Well, you look at Jack Whiten.
Yeah,
he's as tough as they come, and you don't see Jack Whiten like that. But this week, it's put him into that state. So you can imagine what's going on in Luke Brooks' mind behind closed doors. So really happy for him.
What about the Tigers fullback, Jareem Buller?
He's a beauty, isn't he?
Nathan.
Yeah, there was a couple of tackles actually, and this was the desperation that we've been talking about. The tackle on Nathan was a beauty, and there was one on Norfoluma in the corner. This was the try here to Peachy, but it was that sort of game. It was just hard fought, and the young fullback, he's showed some classy moments and took a bomb right at the end of the game.
There we go.
Yeah, that was a beauty.
Is that? Do you think the Tigers have the right makeup of their team now?
Oh, it's hard to say. It's one game, but they're on their way. What they were trustworthy. They weren't dropping balls. They weren't making silly errors. I think even in the first half they'd made an error or two. Like, to put in those sort of conditions, you know, to play a game of footy and move the ball and against the Panthers, who've got great defence, and to hold your nerve and stay in the game, trustworthy. You know, it makes a huge difference when you're not tackling the whole night.
How far were the Panthers off their game, Freddie?
Well, their team looks so different to what we've seen recently. You know, when you just looked at the makeup of their team, and you know the rain's starting to have it's becoming the bogey. They lost the World Club Challenge in wet weather. They got beat by the Broncos in wet weather, and they just never looked comfortable in the wet weather last night as well.
Would they be concerned about this result?
I don't think so.
Why not?
Well, I think they'd be concerned because they got beat, but I feel like they're missing a lot of players at the moment. Not only the players that they're losing every year due to their success, they're also missing. There was a winger missing, a centre missing, a back rower missing, a couple of front rowers missing, a couple of bench players missing. You're talking about 8 players or so out of the team that would have started at the beginning of the year, on top of the 4 or 5 that left over the pre-season.
Nathan Cleary as well. Is he at 100% fitness?
Well, he wasn't kicking, so
kicking.
I think he's just carrying a bit of a quad injury. When I spoke to him last week before the game, I think Steve Cryan did most of the kicking last week as well, but he's still kicking during the game, so it's not as though it's hampering that much. And I've got to say, I'm enjoying watching him play at the moment.
He's competing.
Yeah, he's going good. He's trying hard, and things aren't working as much as they have over the last couple of years, but his attitude never wavers.
Because last week when the Tigers played the Seagulls, Daly Cherry Evans spoke after the game, and he was talking about how they sort of didn't give the Tigers the respect coming into it. Is it a lot harder or is it more difficult to get up for a game when you are taking on a team who, you know, clearly were struggling?
Yeah, it's just human nature. Subconsciously you go into the game and you're probably told all week that you're going to smash them. So it's just natural. You drop your guard a little bit, but I don't think moving forward anyone will be taking the Tigers too lightly.
Yeah, the other thing is that time of the year as well. It's round 9, getting into that sort of middle period of the year. We saw the Cowboys, the Knights really have less than below par games.
Below par?
Below par?
Under par? I think you're being nice. I would say other words.
What words would you say, Joey?
Well, I can't. The sailor would actually blush if I said, but I think...
You're getting into that middle part of the year where you can have that lapse in concentration in your preparation, and it doesn't take much to be off to get beaten by any team in the comp.
Oh, it was great to see for Tigers and long-suffering Tigers fans as well. It looked as though the players enjoyed that one. It looked a little bit like a finals result for them as they celebrated. But we've still got plenty more coming up on the Sunday Footy Show this morning. What a way to cap off what has been an emotional week for the Canberra Raiders and for Jack Whiten with a thrilling 1-point victory over the Dolphins in Golden Point. What was going through your mind, Freddie, watching this and watching the reaction at the end of the match as well?
Well, when it got to 30-all, no one in the Canberra Raiders had kicked a field goal. None of them in their career.
No one on the
to
field
win a game.
had. I don't think anyone on the field had.
What's that?
I don't think anyone on the field had.
Someone in the Dolphins,
Nicarima, maybe?
Yeah.
Oh, Corey Horsburgh could have kicked one. What about his kick?
He lost his licence.
Hit the back fence.
But what about the response from Jack Whiten?
Yeah.
Being in the headlines the whole week and so much, focus on him to come out play like he did.
Well, his game doesn't change much, Jack, and I think sometimes at 5'8", he's a certain type of 5'8". What he is, he's just wholehearted, and he just goes hard, and that's what he did. He just runs hard lines and support. He's got a nice little kick, and he just played to his strengths. And I thought it just showed, especially early, and they were just rolling through. And Kroger's starting to do a good job now on the left-hand side, being back for a couple of weeks. But I thought he just went out there, and you talked about in an early game simplifying their game. He just went out and go, right, I'm just going to run hard, support, I'm going to kick in that corner, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was surprised about the response that Jack put in. That's the sort of player he is. He's got a lot of character to him, and I was actually pleased that the response his teammates put in as well. The Dolphins, they didn't touch the ball until 8 minutes into the game. The first set of the game, the Raiders just rolled straight down the field. They put on a whole heap of passes and they score in the corner through Croker. And this was the third set of the game. And the second one, they got a repeat set. So it was 8 minutes into this contest that the Dolphins actually touched the ball. They're a team that have no idea how to give up, the Dolphins. They've got no idea how to give up. They mightn't start the game overly well, but they try right to the end. And 30-all, to win by a field goal in extra time, that was a good game to watch.
Well, early, I thought it was going to be 50.
He's a player.
Isn't he a good player?
Isn't he?
The way Canberra started, I thought, well, they're going to absolutely pump me. They're going to put 50 on it. They just never, ever go away, the Dolphins. Never go away. Geez, they're a tough team and a fit team. Look really fit.
The Raiders have won 3 in a row now.
So their last loss was that huge loss to the Penrith Panthers, and since then they've been on a run, and a pretty good run as well. They beat the Broncos, who have been at the top of the table. So since that huge loss to the Panthers, it seems as though there's been quite a turnaround. Yeah,
I think Sebastian Kris has been playing great. He's developed his game at fullback over the 9 rounds in this year. Corey Horsburgh has been exceptional. I don't think he had a break through the whole game last night.
Xavier Savage played reserve grade and played well before this game. So he'll be back somewhere.
So he's coming back from that broken jaw that he suffered in the trial match. But speaking of Corey Horsburgh, kicking licence?
Gone. He never had one. He never had one. He was driving unlicensed.
What about when front rowers get the ball? When front rowers get an offload on the last tackle and they're like, this is my time. This was Corey's time.
And
here he goes.
Yeah.
I think he's right-footed, Corey. He kicked it left.
How do you see the Raiders progressing their season, considering the last few weeks that they have had?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got to say I was relieved for Sticky when they got the result. It was good to see, like he wears his heart on his sleeve, and to go down there and get out in front and then get to 30-all, wow, sit on the sideline watching that, and to get a result, well done, Stick. Been a tough week for you and the Raiders, mate. Where they're at the moment, I think they're with, as Billy pointed out earlier, there's about 8 teams on 10 points. So over the next Origin period is going to be very interesting. So they're as good as any of those other teams on their day.
The Dolphins, they like to make their fans stress out a little bit. Just their starts, that's something that they're going to clearly have to focus on, because last week they had that incredible turnaround from such a huge deficit, and this game as well they were down so much. So how do they change that?
Well, it's what Jesse Bromwich spoke about in the post-match press conference, is their starts to games. And look, I think there's enough there in the Dolphins' performances, and they're getting themselves in the contest. But, yeah, just got to focus on the starts, and everyone's got their vulnerabilities at the moment, and the start of the game is the Dolphins.
They've got some young halves too, like even Nikorima. Like, Nikorima's played footy for a long time, but how many times has he been the starting halfback?
Not often.
No, not at all. Like, so you're talking about a couple of people who are very inexperienced at that, and it's so important. Your halfbacks are there, getting their kick away early, getting you into the game, all the same old cliches, but it's not easy. It's not easy, and they're showing it. But they wear into it and they don't give up, so they'll win more than they lose.
Well, it was such a thrilling match to watch, and good on the Canberra Raiders and good on Jack Wyden as well. And coming up straight after the break, we're going to be looking back at the Friday night footy epic at Suncorp Stadium. Stay with us. You're watching the Sunday Footy Show on Nine's Wide World of Sports. Yes, the Rabbitohs on a red-hot run, taking down the Broncos 32 points to 6 at Suncorp Stadium. What a game this was for the Rabbitohs. Freddie, how did you rate their performance?
I like their tactics. I noticed in their defence, they were very smart with their defence. They were hitting and holding and pushing sideways and taking some time off the Brisbane Broncos. They're very patient. They look like they're not in the game sometimes, South Sydney, but their defence keeps them in the games. And they're very patient, and when they strike, it just overwhelms you. You talk to any of the clubs, you talk to any of the teams, when Souths get going, you just can't control them.
Well, you look at the surface, or you look on the surface of their performances, and you see all this flair and brilliance and try-scoring ability. It's their willingness to stay in contests. They weren't the best team on the field in the first 20 minutes. The Broncos were creating opportunities, throwing balls over the top when wingers were jamming. They had a number of opportunities to score some tries, but they just hung in there. Yeah, Cam Murray went to the bin 4 minutes into the game. It was 6-6 until Campbell Graham scored his second try 35 minutes into the game. So the Rabbitohs did all the work early, and then they got the points late.
It's 4 in a row for the Bunnies now. Is that a bit of a warning? Are they right up there in terms of premiership?
For sure.
Could win it?
They're a year older. Some of their younger players look different this year. They're a year older. They look stronger. And they're more confidence.
Tyler's back.
The usual
Liam Knight coming back.
They're still missing Kalyn Ponga on that right side. I just think they've opened up the field. Ilias now playing on the right side to Campbell Graham. Campbell Graham's absolutely killing it. He's getting more quality ball. In the middle, there's a threat of Cook and also Cam Murray, and then the left side, the freaks on the left side.
You forgot Latrell.
Yeah, he goes all right.
He's increasing his work rate. He's getting involved in the game a little bit more. And he has the classy touches when it counts at the end of the game.
And Liam Knight, he made his return in reserve grade.
He played 20-25 minutes.
Yep, so he's looking like he'll be back shortly as well for the Rabbitohs. So they're flying at the moment. But for the Broncos, is that
simple as that?
Is that it? Because they were missing Corey Oates, Ezra Mam and Payne Haas. Put it down to
everything comes off the back of your front rowers. He's a play one front rower. Actually, he runs on play one and play four. They missed him so much. Whatever he wants, mortgage off the town hall at Brisbane and give it to him, because they were one pace without him. They were a different team.
Is that concerning then for the Broncos, and the fact that when they're missing one player, it results like that?
Look at Manly Turbo.
Everyone's got their best players. You take anyone's best player out and it makes a difference to their team. I think if they don't play South Sydney,
you think they would have won?
They're a lot better, and they would have beat. They still would have beat 12 of the other teams in the competition.
But they
come against South, who were ready to go.
Semi-final time, they haven't got Payne. Well, they don't win. That's the talking point. Payne brings Carrigan into play, brings Flegler into play. When he rolls forward, the next play Carrigan goes, then Flegler goes, and then Adam Reynolds and Ezra Mam, they all play off that. If you haven't got that go forward early in the tackle count, you're pushing it uphill.
There's no doubt that he contributes a lot to their team. Ezra Mam, he's been contributing a lot in the last couple of weeks as well. Look, I think if these two teams played again this week, the scores could be different. So,
with Payne?
Well, even without Payne. I still think that they could go out and flip that scoreline on South Sydney if they played again this week. So there's no doubt that those two players back in the team make them a much more complete team, and they all benefit from it. But I still saw enough in that first half an hour that the Broncos, that they had a bit of game about them.
Do you think that if the Broncos had Ezra and, Jesse Arthurs was,
He goes well.
yeah. So if they
Corey
had
Oates.
and if they had Ezra Mann back,
Yeah.
They'll play again.
but still no Payne
They'll play
Haas,
again.
do you think that they still would be struggling?
They got pumped by 26, didn't they, at home? And the surface was really slippery, so it was hard to move the ball. They just looked in a different class without Payne.
What do you make of the Rabbitohs at one point having some extra players on the field?
Was it 14 seconds?
14.
The sideline official,
you know
do your
what?
job.
But that's it.
It's a bad error. Like, it's a bad error from South Sydney on the sideline. It's a bad error from the officials as well. Like, you can't have this. It's a bit embarrassing.
Do I see a 16?
Like, I see there every week, and I don't know how they get it wrong. Like, you know, I can see there's confusion and things get, you know, tempered, but you can't get it wrong. You can't get that wrong.
not at this level.
No, seriously.
It's not junior footy.
There's talk about taking points off and that sort of stuff. Like
It didn't have an outcome.
That didn't
It
have an
didn't-
effect on the game. Like, if there's a fine, fair enough, but yeah, I think that's just a mistake.
It's more of a we
But
need
the
to look
league
at
are in
how
control. Like, the league are the ones that actually, they're grabbing the card and they're allowing to move on and off. Like, you know, whether it was a HIA, I'm not sure how they got it wrong. But no, there's an official there every single time you're going on and off the field. It's not like the old days where you just ran up the sideline and ran on and you hope they came off in time.
It's not South Sydney. They have to literally, from the NRL official, grab one of the
Absolutely.
cards. So it's more on how the game was.
I don't know how. Yeah, well, it'd be interesting when we find out how it did happen. Like I said, I see it's in front of me every week. You don't know. I just can't imagine how they got it wrong.
It does get a bit mayhem down there.
But that's part of the game, you know, and that's a huge part of the game. There's a couple of calls there where, you know, if there's HIAs or sim bins, there's a few things you can actually do to the rules to give yourself an advantage. And you need to nail them. And you see teams and clubs just choke under the pressure, you know, like you've got to get someone off instead of someone else because of a HIA. And, you know, there are ways that you can actually work it to your advantage. And the great teams, and I've got to say Melbourne actually, they set the standard normally where, you know, they're just like that. Just clockwork on the sideline. There's bang, bang. Normally always get it right. There was actually a game against Manly where I thought they got it wrong, just leading into half-time. It was interesting because I forget who was coming off. I think King was involved there, or some maybe a sim bin and a HIA, and I'm not sure if they got it right then, but they're a pretty good standard, Melbourne. So watching them on the sideline's pretty good.
It's interesting watching some of the teams and you've got all the different voices yelling and who's
Lots of
dominating.
yelling.
Lots of yelling happening down there. It's great to watch. Yes, a huge win for the Parramatta Eels over the Newcastle Knights. That final score, 43 points to 12. We'll talk a little bit more about the Eels, but first off, Joey, I've got to get your thoughts on this Knights performance overall. How would you summarise that?
Without swearing.
Without swearing.
Well, there was 65 missed tackles. Parramatta made 13 clean breaks. I actually watched the game back. Parramatta should have scored another 5 tries. They bombed certain tries. So the score could have been 70 or 80, just off the pace. So far off the pace, it's not funny. Disappointing. They've really competed hard this year. Just some of the simple missed tackles. It's just hard to watch. Look, it's just letting them run through. It just showed zero fight.
Well, it's one thing that they have shown over the last month is plenty of fight, and the floodgates just opened on them. Missed tackles, their edges were torn to bits, left and right, and Parramatta were in a mood. They took advantage of, well, I suppose, the lack of desire in Newcastle's defensive line, and yeah, that's why we see the score.
What goes through your mind, Bill? Obviously, you've coached Kalyn Ponga State of Origin. He's a superstar fullback. What do you see when you're watching him playing in the halves rather than at fullback?
Well, he's played 3 games in 10 months. That's not easy to do, and the time that he's had out since round 2, he hasn't done a lot of running. He hasn't done a lot of training, and our game is a game where you've got to get your timing. You've got to get those reps in, and you can see with his defence there, he just didn't take his feet to the target. He's just lunging at him. There, gets planted. So it just takes a little bit of time. He's gone through a fair bit over the last 10 months, so he just needs to play some footy. When his team's off the pace, that doesn't help.
I thought Kurt Mann at hooker, I was curious over that decision. You've just lost your hooker, and then Phoenix Crossland played there last week.
He's been playing well, Phoenix, too.
Well, I thought he'd been playing well. I couldn't understand Kurt Mann. I thought, you know, he threw a bad pass in the first thing and then missed it. He just had a bad 10 minutes. And the Kalyn thing, I feel like I don't understand why he got moved there in the first place. I just feel like they should put him back there, find a place for the fullback and move on.
Put him back at fullback?
Absolutely.
Where's Lockie Miller go? He's been the best player for
Put him on the wing. Mazu. Make the others fight for it. Or bring him off the bench. Do something.
Is it getting to that point now where it's you've got to change something?
Well, you got to. I think the coach needs to, own this week. Put it that way. He needs to own this week. They got the bye. Well, there you go. Well, they've been given a week off, so it'll be interesting what they do in their week off. But he's got a big couple of weeks, and I think he's got to talk to Kalyn, talk to the senior players, and get a path forward, because I thought the Kurt Mann experiment starting him didn't work at all, and then Kalyn just didn't look confident either. So, you need to go out confident. You need to go out believing in what the coach is talking about, and that didn't show from early on in the game.
You got smashed like that as a player. What would you do with the week off?
Well, you got to train. You just got to train. It's the only way to do it. It's the only way to get confidence is to train. You can't. There's no other way around it.
Just absolutely slam the training sessions this week and see how that can turn it around?
Well, in a round, what you do is you get to rest your mind because you're not playing. It's your mind, the thing that really ties you. I remember as a player, you'd be thinking every night before you went to bed, thinking about footy. That was the thing that sort of, sometimes it was 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes it was longer, kept you up. But you don't get to play. That's where you get the week off from. You get the week off from thinking. So, training. Training's the best way to get rid of any lack of confidence.
All right, well, hopefully the Knights can turn it around, but a great win for the Parramatta Eels. Well, the Cronulla Sharks put on an absolute masterclass against the struggling Cowboys on Thursday night, 44 points to 6 in the end, leading the Sharks to second spot on the ladder. Such an impressive victory for Cronulla. And that man, Nicho Hynes, we speak about him every single week, but just watching him, how impressed are you with his effort?
Oh, he's just killing it. Absolutely killing it. He's got so much time. I feel like every time I see him, he gets better and better. Just at the top of his game.
He's the star of the show, but they all contribute. They're a real team. They're a real team, the Sharks, and they're putting it all together. They're defending a lot better now than they were earlier in the season, and their attack is brilliant. But like I said, all contributing. Teague Wilton, Jack Williams, Royce Hunt, they all do their job and they all contribute to the outcome of the game. Nicho Hynes just gets he's the cream on top, isn't he? He just sets up the plays and pulls the trigger, but they're a real team, this Sharks outfit.
Poor old Cowboys. Terrible start. Kyle Feld dropped the ball, try. They went down, they marched all the way down there. They got a restart, try. Another error try. It was just an awful start.
What do you think has happened to the Cowboys? Because last year they were, 80 minutes away from playing in a grand final. And then this year it looks completely different and the team hasn't changed too much.
Well, they all talk about how hard they trained last year. And you've got a young coach who's also dealing with a lot of players that went away to a World Cup. So obviously they didn't come back and do the same sort of intensity that they did last year. And it just shows you what happens. I feel that's what... If I had to make an assessment from what rumours I've heard, and that's as far as I know too, I haven't been up to Townsville. I wouldn't have a clue what's going on there, but that's what it looks like. They were hardened last year.
They've got a real lack of energy in their team at the moment. And that was highlighted because they played a team with a whole heap of energy in their club. I think that's a factor, the World Cup. I think the fact that they went to a preliminary final last year also their off-season went deep into November, December, so they didn't have the same amount of time together in the pre-season. And then they're individuals. Some individuals are just not playing as well as they were last year. I don't think Chad Townsend's anywhere near his best. So,
do you think his position's under threat? Well, really, he got no one
Who
else.
from? Well, we haven't
young,
seen.
young Chester did he didn't know.
Is he a half?
Yeah, he's a half.
He came in to replace Chad when Chad went from the field with the calf injury.
So they've got a lot of injuries now in the middle, especially their middle forwards. Now they lose Cohen Hess. Or is he copped a fine? We don't know yet, do we?
Well, Nano's gone for 4 weeks.
No, he's gone for 4 weeks. They're up against it.
For Jeremiah Nanai, that means...
They've got the Roosters Sunday.
Yeah. Nanai, out of State of Origin Game 1 contention now, how big of a blow is that for Queensland and for yourself?
yeah, Jeremiah's got a month on the sidelines. So he was one of those players that went away in the World Cup and would have had limited pre-season. Jeremiah's not playing as well as he was last year. It's amazing how many times these sort of things happen to you when you're not at your best. And Jeremiah's not on his own up there at the Cowboys, but certainly not outlaying the habits that he had this time last year. But it's been a big 18 months for Jeremiah. He came on to the scene last year and scored 17 tries, the most by any forward in the game, and he had an exceptional season. So he's got a month to go and get himself nice and fit and work on those parts of his game that he needs to get right.
And so because State of Origin, we were talking about this before the show, because State of Origin, so he'll miss 4 weeks, but because the State of Origin team gets selected before his suspension is up, that automatically rules him out.
Well, there's 3 games to go before the first team's picked. So that game just before Origin, 3 days before Origin, doesn't count. So you've got to, he's unfortunately 4 weeks. If it was 3 weeks, he'd still be eligible. But 4 weeks rules him out of game 1.
I think Lottie Takiri, they used
TBC.
TBC, Lottie Takiri.
That was the rule.
Queenslanders.
It's always a confusing one. All right, well, we've got plenty more coming your way. We're going to be talking all things Sunday footy coming up straight after the break.